Is intelligence really just about facts and memorization? Spoiler alert, it's not. And if you think being smart is about having the highest IQ or knowing random trivia, I got some news for you, baby. You might not be as smart as you think. And that's okay, because most people overestimate how smart they actually are. Let's be real. Most of us were taught that smart equals school, test scores, GPA, big words, who can recite the most useless facts at the dinner table. That's how we measure smart. But here's the twist. Some of the smartest people I've ever met couldn't hold a conversation without being condescending or completely disconnected from reality. Meanwhile, I know people with GEDs who can navigate life, people, and systems like a seasoned diplomat. I've been a professor at community college, multiple liberal arts colleges, and an Ivy League graduate program. And hands down, my community college students had the most sharp razor analyses. But often those analyses demanded that as the professor, I had a particular ear to hear their brilliance, because it wasn't structured in a way recognized by the Ivory Tower. Luckily, it mimicked the environment I grew up in. It was long-winded. It was articulated in slang and storytelling and deep sighs between words. It also was articulated in things that I call pimp riddles. If upon hearing pimp riddles, you don't immediately know what a pimp riddle is, I feel sorry. I can't really explain what a pimp riddle is, but it usually comes out the mouth of an older black man from the US South. I'll leave it at that. But when you really listened, not just for structure, but for substance, you realized they wasn't just repeating something they read in a book. They were thinking through their real life experiences in real time. They were thinking about what they had actually gone through. They were doing the intellectual labor that the academy often overlooks because it don't come polished, APA-cited packages. And here's the tea. Brilliance does not always speak in correct English. Sometimes it shows up in code switching, in rhythm, in metaphor, in the way somebody breaks down capitalism using a barbershop story and a corner store receipt, never once using the word capitalism. And if you don't have the ear or the humility to catch it, you're going to miss that thing, baby. Most people I'm referencing are from high context cultures. Read non-white cultures. So when we talk about intelligence, we have to ask, who gets to define that? Because if our only measure is who sounds most like a TED Talk, we're going to keep missing the people who are out here making meaning in the margins. Let's slow down a little bit. Because smart, intelligent, and brilliant, those are not synonyms, baby. Those are not interchangeable terms. And the distinctions matter. So smart. For me, smart performs. Smart is contextual. It's rewarded in school, in office meetings, in debates. It's about being quick, correct, impressive. Smart can solve a puzzle fast. But smart might not even know why the puzzle matters. It thrives on recall and precision. Smart gets you points. Smart is like the banking concept of education that we learned about in ADW in college. The teacher puts in, the student spits back out, much like an ATM transaction. Little analysis is happening. You just spitting back out what was put in you. Smart gets you points. It gets you claps. You know the type, always ready with a fun fact or a rebuttal, but couldn't read a room if it came with a diagram. Now, intelligence understands. It's slow. It's layered. It connects dots you didn't even know could be connected. It asks better questions instead of needing to be right. Intelligent people are often underestimated because they don't need to dominate the conversation. But when they speak, they shift the entire atmosphere. And then you got brilliant. Brilliant disrupts. Brilliant is a visionary. It creates what didn't exist before. Brilliant often feels alone. Brilliant is when insight meets imagination, meets courage. It might look messy. It might sound poetic. It might be slow and non-linear. But brilliant shakes up something inside of you. It doesn't just inform, it transforms. Brilliant is like the coworker who in a 60-minute meeting sits for 55 minutes. And when the room has made the decision, gathered all the data, that coworker says, I have an idea. It pisses off the person that's ready to go, but the idea transforms the atmosphere because the brilliant coworker needed to gather data, synthesize data, weigh pros and cons, look at who was going to be most benefited, who was going to be most burdened, look at all of the outcomes that were possible, and then come to a conclusion. Brilliant takes things it's never seen before. Or it takes 10 things and 5 things it's never seen before, 5 things it has seen before, and it synthesizes it into something brand new. So ask yourself, have you been chasing smartness to impress or cultivating brilliance to impact? Because brilliance don't need a podium. It needs space and sometimes silence. Now, smart's not bad. Most psychologists, especially Western cultural psychologists, spend a lot of time studying smart. Like Howard Gardner talks about multiple intelligences, and not just in the buzzword way your old school might have used. Real distinctions: emotional intelligence, social, spatial, musical, bodily, kinesthetic, existential, even nature-based intelligence. We start seeing this in kids a lot. When the US system primarily rewards audio-visual learners. So we have a lot of people running around here, myself included before I learned this, thinking I was smarter than most people, when really I was sitting inside a system that privileged a way that I interpreted information well. If the system reinforces what I do well, I'm gonna look like a high performer. Whereas I could sit next to a friend who's a kinesthetic learner or a spatial learner, and the system we're sitting inside, the school system, awards audio-visual learners. What's gonna happen to the kinesthetic or spatial learner? They're gonna appear to be not smart. And so some people are smart, and some people are sitting inside of systems that reward their ability more than others. Because if you had put that audio-visual learner inside of a kinesthetic environment, they'd have flopped. They'd have looked real dumb. Real dumb. So we have the multiple intelligence map, emotional intelligence. We call that EQ. The ability to regulate your emotions, the ability to read the room, not blow up on your boss via Slack. That's a form of intelligence too, because more y'all need to learn how to read the room. More y'all need to learn how to read the room. Your emotional intelligence is basura. Then we got social intelligence. Some people could just walk into a room and know how to navigate tension, connect strangers, or make everybody feel seen. That's not luck. That's intelligence. My godson, he is, 2025, so he's 25, born in 2000. He is on the spectrum. There are places that he does not thrive in intelligence. But social intelligence, baby, Tyler Johnson runs circles. I have seen him at 12 years old work a room because his social intelligence is sky high. But when he was 3, back when we used the word retarded, the New Orleans public school system was going to label him retarded, and his very brilliant mother had vision and said, ooh, no, y'all not putting that on my child's record. But social intelligence, he's genius. He can walk into a room and just know how to navigate the tension, connect strangers, make everybody feel seen. And that's not just luck. That is something wired in him. That is intelligence. Then we got bodily intelligence. You ever watch somebody dance and their body was telling you a whole story? That's another kind of brilliance. That's knowing without needing words. That's why we need the arts. That's why y'all need to check out Alvin Ailey. Meanwhile, the smartest guy in the room is asking if we can circle back and leverage synergy while everybody else want to go home. Seth, the meeting ended 10 minutes ago. Matter of fact, this meeting could have been an email, but because your social intelligence is basura, you got us all in this room trying to drag this thing out, leveraging, circling back, trying to talk about next steps. The meeting is over and we want to go home. Boost your social intelligence. Read the room. I also think this is racialized. I think that when you live in cultures that reward the behaviors around your racial group, you don't have to read the room. Because baby, little black and brown kids been reading the room since before they could walk. So by the time they're 5, they're masterful at emotional intelligence, social intelligence, and the like. So let's talk about who gets left out of SMART. If the traditional idea of intelligence is deeply tied to access, and access is deeply tied to race, and race is deeply tied to class, and then we have elements like neurodivergence. If you're a black kid who processes verbally, thinks out loud, uses metaphor, or does not test well, you're probably labeled unfocused or unmotivated. If you're brilliant, but you don't write a 5-paragraph essay the right way or use your own language and rhythm, you're probably getting passed over in school. Your mama probably had to come up there to them people's school and they were starting to talk about IEPs and ILPs. You get passed over even though your ideas could rebuild entire systems. If you are trying to rebuild a system, dismantle a system, and you don't have people with varying intelligences on your team, you come up with stuff like move fast and break things. Or move fast and break shit. Dig at Silicon Valley. You could tell it's nothing but you know what? A lot of them white boys be neurodivergent. Using neurodivergence as a new racism for white people. That's a whole nother video. Neurodivergence is the new racism for the whites. Anyway, back to the point. We have people with dyslexia, people who think in pictures, who smell color, people who remix ideas in ways the test makers didn't prepare for, baby. They wasn't ready for that for the SAT. They wasn't ready for that for the ACT. Do they still take the ACT? I don't know how I made it, girl. I got a 19 on the damn ACT. And that SAT, if colleges wasn't taking essays when I was applying to school, I would be undegreed because they made them standardized test scores and me, what's the opposite of go together real bad? Me and standardized tests did not get along. Whew. Anyway, the test makers didn't prepare for the people who think in pictures, who smell colors, who remix ideas in ways that they just wasn't ready for. They often have to translate their brilliance into whiteness or compliance just to be seen. Somebody out there know a lot about that. Having to translate your brilliance into whiteness. Having to run things through whiteness. I've had to translate my brilliance into whiteness. I've had to run my gender and sexuality through a cishet lens to gather models and representation just to be seen. And that's a trap. Because when brilliance doesn't look how the system wants it to look, it's getting buried, or it's getting labeled too much, or it's unrefined, or that translates into, again, ILPs, IEPs. And I'm not saying IEPs and ILPs are not necessary, but I do still want to know why mostly white kids are the ones that benefit most from IEPs and ILPs. Because by the time they got to my graduate course at Columbia, I will never forget the most brilliant conversation we had. The truth is that I just wasn't really prepared to deliver a lecture. So I just kind of translated it into like a circle and we just started talking. Every professor has come to class not ready to deliver a lecture. But this unprepared day turned into the most sadly brilliant day. And it was starkly by race. The children, not children because, it's grad school, but the students with IEPs, at that point, they're called accommodations. ODS is the Office of Disability Services. A conversation arose. The black kids with accommodations, you could take longer to take your test. You get longer in the deadline for the assignment to be due. Accommodations can be vast. The black kids and the brown kids were more fearful of really using the accommodations than white kids. To say that they were not fearful or they had no trepidation to use them accommodations is an understatement. Now, mind you, in this class, we have they're essentially peers because they're in an MSW program and essentially going to be graduating and potentially working together at various places within the social work field. But it's almost like the white kids was looking at the black kids like they was dumb. Not dumb in this context, but like, why don't y'all use the fuck out of these accommodation letters? But for the black kids, it was already ingrained in them. To my video last week, you got to work twice as hard to get half as far. And if they are seeing their accommodations as an inherent impediment, the white kids are seeing it as something that springboard them forward, a benefit. Somewhat unrelated. Did you know that schizophrenia used to be a white woman's disease? And when I learned this, it blew my mind. The majority of schizophrenia diagnoses now are black boys. But schizophrenia was once hinged on white women, the docile white woman, the woman that, was the home taker, the homemaker. And the DSM, we're on a 5 now, I believe. But back when it was like the 4 or the 3, back in the 60s, they added 2 words to the DSM that completely shifted schizophrenia into having a high number of black men be diagnosed with schizophrenia. Which the problem is that they willy-nilly add things to the axes of the DSM. It was without research. It was no peer review, nothing, not a placebo, not a nothing. They just haphazardly added 2 words to the axes of schizophrenia that made it go from mostly white women to mostly black men. And those 2 words, hostility and aggression, haphazardly added to the axes to qualify for a schizophrenia diagnosis. Because before that, it was white women, the delicate or eccentric, the poets, the academics, the middle class women who were driven to insanity by the dual pressures of housework and motherhood. Because white women back then were viewed as too delicate to be doing housework and motherhood. But what happened was, so this was around the 60s. And so you have to think about what is happening in the 60s. We got the civil rights protests. Martin Luther King is assassinated in 68? JFK is assassinated in 63. We even got the Cuban Missile Crisis. We got the Vietnam War, and APA revises the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual in 1968. So black people was angry back then. I mean, you had smoldering anger over racism and the perpetual dehumanization of black people that was rioting and revolting against harsh repression. And so in 68, the APA releases the DSM-2, and they claimed it was a more objective and scientific document than the 52 predecessor, the DSM-1. And that DSM-2 added them two words to that axis as a sign of schizophrenia, hostility and aggression, contextualizing the 60s with what's going on. And that exact same disease that was initially viewed as a quiet, passive white woman's disease was arbitrarily, unscientifically changed by a medical institution without rigorous or scientific processes, not a controlled trial in sight, not a qualitative or a quantitative study whatsoever. So they used the very valid state-created hostility and aggression of black people in the 60s and infused it into a psychiatric illness to align with existing cultural anxieties about race. And that transformation has traveled in time to right now, shaping America's notions of one of the most popular mental health illnesses of our time, schizophrenia. How It Became a Black Disease by Jonathan Metzl is a great book to read about that. So why do I bring that up? Because when you talk about brilliance, and when you talk about race and class, you can't not talk about things like mental illness. You can't. They say there's a fine line between genius and insanity, and that's true. I once got into a room full of so-called thought leaders, PhDs, industry experts, the whole thing. But you know who made the most sense in the room? The person who said the least, the person who listened the most, and then said one sentence that cracked the entire conversation open. That's intelligence. So maybe being loud, fast, or correct ain't the only way to be smart. I'm gonna say it's not even the best way. All in all, maybe the problem is not you. Maybe the problem is how we've been taught to measure value. Maybe brilliance was never supposed to fit on a Scantron bubble. Maybe it's not supposed to be tidy or teachable or testable. Maybe it's supposed to feel like your grandma's stories, long, layered, seemingly off topic, but by the end, you've learned everything you need to know about survival, strategy, self-worth. Fannie Lou Hamer just popped in my head. So here's my challenge to you. How do you define intelligence? Because if it only includes academic success or sounding smart in debates, you're missing the whole picture. Being smart is about how you move through the world, how you think about your thoughts, which is why my platform everywhere is creating a space for you to think about your thoughts, how you treat people, how you respond to discomfort. Do you spaz on the people or no? Can you regulate your emotions? It's not about the score. It's about the story you telling through your actions, through your self-awareness, through your impact. What are people saying about you? What impressions have you left with them? Let's stop trying to fit into somebody else's narrow definition of smart, and let's start celebrating the full spectrum of brilliance. Drop your definition of intelligence in the comments. Let's rewrite these rules together. And if this video hit you, like it, subscribe to the channel, and share it with the smartest person you know, especially if they don't always get the credit. I'm the Ignant intellectual, the bridge between the hood and the ivory tower, black brilliance, formal education, not required. Listen, you ain't gotta agree with me, but at least know why you think what you think. Peace.